As this is Wellness and Recovery Sunday at Grace St. Luke's, and we are honored to have Laura White and Shannon Tucker as our guests today. But before we begin, I'll open us with prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, in the glory and gift of this new day, we give you thanks and praise. We give you thanks for our bodies, your temples, for this creation, the stewardship to which we are called to care for ourselves, our souls and bodies, to be mindful of wellness to your glory, to give thanks for those who have been on the journey of recovery and the beauty of what we continue to learn from and with them. Thank you this day that we are gathered here in this space and through technology to have this conversation. May we offer ourselves, our souls and bodies, and to the love that is you, and carry that love into the world. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So we have several people gathered here in Tresvant Hall, and our speakers today, it is a forum that is a conversation about the gamut of addiction that can affect one's life. And we have two faithful souls who will enlighten us and bring us into a conversation today. The co-chairs of the Diocesan Commission on Wellness on Recovery, and we're glad that they're here today. So please join me in welcoming Laura White and Shannon Tucker.
Well, good morning. I'm so glad to see a room full of people and happy to have an opportunity to talk about recovery and wellness today. Shannon and I are both part of the West Tennessee Recovery Ministries of the Episcopal Church, and I have recently been joined the National Board of the Recovery Ministries. So I know I've talked to some of you. I've joined an adult forum a couple of years ago and was here and presented. However, it's been some time since I've been here, so I'm grateful to be back. Let Shannon say a couple things about himself.
Thank you. If Shannon could get the mic on, that would be better. So good morning. I'm grateful to be here today. Like Laura said, we're the co-chairs of the Recovery Commission of the Diocese. The Recovery Commission has been around for a really long time in the diocese.
Yeah.
It went away for a little while, and then my good friend Lucy Owens, who some of you may know, when I first got into recovery, she said to me, "You're an Episcopalian, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "We're going to start the Recovery Commission again." And we did. That was in 2004, 2005. And it's been a fantastic ministry for us. We're having a retreat next weekend at St. Columba. I know the guy who might be able to get you in if you still want to come. It's me. So you can talk to me after the service if you are interested in that. It's a fantastic retreat led by the Reverend Dr. Stuart Hoke out of Little Rock. And he's been here. I think he was here last year. He's been here many times. He's a fantastic preacher and teacher. And we'd love for you to join us if you want.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm wondering, I'm pointing this and it doesn't seem to be registering. I could be pressing the wrong button. The big circle? Yeah. I'm thinking because I'm not pointing at the projector.
In the time of COVID, technology.
Yeah,
Maybe you're
exactly.
holding it upside down and doing it the wrong way.
Possibly, quite possibly. So I'm a therapist, I'm not anything about technology. Okay,
So that's the
so
one that goes.
good. Let's see. I'm going to turn it over to somebody else. Okay, so again, part of what I wanted to weave in today, or what the presentation that I wanted to share with you all today, is kind of a combination of wellness ideas and things that I have utilized myself in the last 20 months and ones that I have shared with the people that I talk to and clients. And also to weave into the impact that this has had on the recovery community. You know, one of the things that has occurred with the pandemic is that we all are experiencing the same trauma, the same stress, the same situation, which is different than other traumas and events that have occurred. when they're weather events, they're typically regional and they're only affecting one part of the community. But this has affected everybody in the world the same. We're all experiencing the same stressor, but it's our individual coping skills are being tasked. And we all have different reactions to the same stressor. So what I want to share with you today is how those stressors get exacerbated, how they are made worse, and are some ideas about how you can get tools that you can use to utilize them. So I want to share with you some recovery tools and some healthy coping skills. I'd also encourage you, anyone here who has questions or ideas that they want to share, please feel free. We're a casual group, so feel free to jump in. So as Shannon talked about, the Recovery Commission in the late 70s, the Episcopal Church began the official ministry to those who are suffering from addiction. Addiction is a spiritual malady, so it makes sense that the church is part of recovery. And over time, the church has been a place that people go to for support, for comfort. For myself, the church was very important, a very important pathway in my recovery. So my involvement with addiction really has been professionally. I've been working in the field about 30 years, but personally I've been working in the field for about 50 years, maybe longer, I'm not so sure. So it's a family disease, and they're probably, and in my family we can trace it back to about 5 generations. So I have a lot of life experience in how to deal with this, but I've also kind of developed some professional tools too. Probably they're related, I'm thinking, that I got into the field of treating addiction as a result of the life experience I had. So part of what I hope I can share to you will be meaningful from my own personal experience. So again, part of the things that we're all experiencing, what I like to call wash, rinse, repeat. It's same day, different day perhaps, same activities. Although recently I feel like we are, at least for me, yesterday I attended a baby shower. I was around people, we weren't masked, everybody had been vaccinated, so there are some things returning to normal. But what this also has happened, this uniform, this collective trauma, this collective experience, has created within ourselves, brought out the weaknesses, and as a system and as a society. Shannon, feel free to jump in when you've got...
Yeah, so the unprecedented and unrelenting part of this, if you're a person in recovery, it's just like church, where you've missed church for 19 months, where you've missed being in that community. And we have in the recovery community the same problems. March 13th of last year, or no, 2 years ago now, 2020, almost all of my recovery meetings moved online. And it was not something we'd ever done before. And we had to figure out how that worked in community.
Well, and recovery, again, occurs in community. Just like church is different. I mean, I have enjoyed attending churches in different cities. My cousin is a minister in Virginia. I've enjoyed attending his services. But it's different in being in your own church with your church family. I'm a member of Holy Apostles in Collierville, and so it almost brought tears to my eyes to be back in the sanctuary with my church family. So 12-step meetings are very similar. Recovery occurs in community, and there are things that really occur in a meeting that you can't replicate on a screen. So that's part of what I've seen professionally is people are really struggling or really suffering because of that lack of community, that isolation. And there's sort of an interesting contrast. There's some people who are home alone and isolated, and there's some people who are home with all the people they live with, and that creates a whole other time of stress, who don't have any time alone. So that's another kind of stress that people are experiencing. We have some people in the audience reacting to that. Yes, but
Could be my husband reacting to that.
And I had the experience actually this weekend. My husband's away on a trip, and so I had the house to myself. Boy, was that kind of enjoyable. Love him, but it was sort of nice to have space to myself.
One of the big points up there is the loss of touch that we've all experienced together. We're all in different places about how comfortable we are. In the fellowship I go to, hugs are a big part of it. And the first time we went back to a recovery meeting in person, it was glorious. But we were all sitting about as far apart as the people are in this room. And it was very like, do I touch you? Can I hug you? And people at different places. And we didn't for a while. We stay seated. We usually get in a circle at the end, and either in our fellowship we kind of hug each other at the end in a big group circle. And we haven't done that in 19 months as well. So the loss of touch is I like just the feel of just touching another person.
Right.
has caused lots of emotional stuff for me as well. So.
Absolutely. Well, the other part is, the loss of touch affects our brains. Addiction is a brain disorder. It's a thinking disorder. It's also, the neurochemicals in your brain. And touch regulates those chemicals. And so, I've had the physical experience of when I'm going to Al-Anon meetings early on in my recovery and just sobbing in the arms of a stranger, but a fellow member who really could provide comfort. And it's not the same when we're, across the room from each other. It's not the same when we're on the screen. That physical touch, that regulation that we're missing as part of it. So I have seen, and I think we probably can see people in our lives, an increase in depression, an increase in anxiety. There's this whole new layer of stuff we have to navigate. Like, can you touch people? When do you take your mask off? How do you shake hands? How do you greet? Do I want to go to this baby shower? Am I putting the mother at risk? All of these things that we have to navigate now. And the other piece that happens, particularly that I've seen with people early on in recovery, because it's the brain's not working, it's kind of offline. And when you are in that community and being with other people who have suffered that pain as well, they have the understanding, it's sort of unspoken, there's this comfort that occurs when you are all together. People are struggling with figuring out how to enter into a new way of living virtually on the screen.
And even you think about one of the things that we say many times in early recovery is you should go to 90 meetings in 90 days. You should go to a recovery meeting every day for the first 90 days. And that's hard these days for those folks, because it used before the pandemic, you could go to 7 meetings every day and you would see at least a few of the same people at all those meetings. But because of the pandemic, it's narrowed so much that you can go to a meeting and there can be 6 people in the room, and previously we had 46 people in a room. So that part has been difficult.
Yeah, certainly a challenge. So part of recovery from loss, recovery from addiction, recovery from trauma is cultivating meaning. And what I mean by that is figuring out how it makes sense to you. And so there's, again, trying to identifying yourself as a recovery person, identifying yourself, creating that new identity so that you can move forward.
Yeah, what I was talking earlier about recovery meetings, well, when we moved online, it became this new type of community. And it's actually been wonderful in some ways that we can connect. And I've gone to meetings all over the country in different places when I needed to. At 9 o'clock in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, you can always log on and find a meeting to go to. So that part has been really helpful. But there is this loss that we've all experienced, and trying to figure out how to navigate that has been complicated.
Yeah, and a challenge. So finding that community to rely upon, having that access to the people who, in meetings, it's typical when a newcomer comes that you pass along a phone list and with names and phone numbers. That's still offered virtually, but again, it's not quite the same when you don't have eyes on somebody.
And with smaller meetings, it's so much harder. There can sometimes be 3 women in a room and there's a new person, and you're like, you can have these 3 phone numbers, and one of them has been in recovery for 10 years, and the other 2 are pretty new as well. So,
yeah, having access to that. So finding ways, again, to stay connected and creating that community. Again, it broadens that. So I think what's happened, at least what I've experienced with the virtual connections, we have more superficial connections. I don't know if that makes sense, and fewer intimate connections. I don't know, because I think it has to do somewhat with touch. Again, I'm thinking about the brain chemicals like oxytocin that create that sense of bonding and belonging that we miss virtually, that is critical to early recovery.
And we have this thing called the meeting after the meeting, which the recovery meeting occurs, but then after the meeting, sometimes I get in trouble because I'm there too late. My husband's trying to order dinner, and he's like, "Where are you?" We stay and connect in ways that we can't really online, and we found new ways to do it. We've stayed 10 or 15 minutes after a meeting and tried to connect with people that way. Mm-hmm. But healing in community, figuring out how to do that right now, has been also been challenging.
Okay, so I wanted to say a couple of things about gratitude. This is a practice that I've been aware of. There's a lot of research on this and the positive ways it affects your brain. Again, getting back to the healing the brain as part of recovery. So I adopted this practice kind of unintentionally. It started really last winter. I have a dog, so I take her out every morning. The first first day I walked out when it was cold, and I sort of felt that contrast of temperature. I sort of said, "Ooh, I'm so glad I have this warm coat that I can wear." And so that, it just kind of did that. Every time I would walk out the door, I would just say, "Thank you." And so then it turned into sort of as I spent time in the yard with her, looking at different things, of just practicing gratitude, just intentionally spending 5-10 minutes, just thanking God, just being grateful, and noticing the good things that were around me. It just might be the change of color. That's what we're, and the trees that I was driving here today, noticing the burgundy colors and the gold that are coming out. It's such a beautiful, spectacular. So, and what that does, I think human nature, or the way our brains are designed for survival, is that we do kind of focus in on the negative, because that's really what's kept us alive. If we just pretended those negative things didn't occur, we wouldn't be able to keep ourselves safe. However, that can be to our own detriment when you rehearse that negative. It's like you're exercising that negativity muscle. So gratitude intentionally exercises that positive muscle. So I have found that to be particularly a useful tool.
And gratitude connects to mindfulness so much for me. So many times during my day, I forget to breathe. I don't know about you all, but I can be holding my breath for, like, if you are right now, think about it. Just take a deep breath, a real breath, and like just a moment of a deep breath can center me so much more. And then for me, I've worked on mindfulness practices over the course of my recovery. I remember in the very beginning, I explored lots of different spiritual paths. And I think my mom was thinking, "Oh Lord, what is he doing?" I did all kinds of meditation practices to try to figure out what worked for me. And I found mostly that, like, breathing and paying attention to the breath. I used to, in very early recovery, there was a person who I loved and still love, who would sit across from me at meetings, and I would be reading the literature at the beginning of the meeting, and she would look across to me and go, "Breathe." I connected with that, the idea of, like, taking a breath before I get on that treadmill of going.
Yeah, well, it's that, it's the hamster wheel that occurs in the brain, the thoughts that just don't stop. And breathing is a terrific way. Again, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It physiologically will slow everything down and creates that space. Other things that happened, and the church was sort of instrumental for me in developing this practice of self-compassion. I joined the Episcopal Church as an adult when my kids were little. So the baptism that I was able to attend the early service this morning. So the baptism was really one of the very first rituals I experienced in the Episcopal Church with my kids. And just that whole process of God's grace and welcome and and worthiness in terms of feeling accepted by a community and allowing myself to be compassionate to myself. So much of the wreckage that occurs with addiction, there's so much pain and suffering with the individual and with relationships. And so the church and the liturgy in the church, it can really be part of that recovery and that self-compassion.
And the liturgy in the recovery community is similar. We have our own liturgy in recovery communities. Lots of folks get recovery, most people that I know, through the 12 steps. There are many other paths that people can walk, but this is the one that I'm the most familiar and comfortable with. And we're not gonna make you take all 12 steps today, but I could talk about the first 3, which are really foundational for me. And it's, we admitted we were powerless over, and you fill in the blank. I'm powerless over addiction. I'm powerless over alcohol. I'm also powerless over you. That sometimes is the hardest one for me to remember, that I am powerless over you as well. That the things that I can control are inside my imaginary hula hoop. I remember my mom and I were in a group together one time, and we were completing each other's sentences in early recovery, and the therapist walked up and got an actual hula hoop from behind a podium and went over to me and my mother and put hula hoops around us and said, "You stay in your hula hoop and you stay in your hula hoop." So I'm powerless over my mom as well. Sometimes I have a little bit of power. So the second step came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So that's a process. I mean, many people come to recovery with an understanding of God that is an earlier understanding from their childhood or from some trauma that they had connected with God previously. And coming to believe that you can determine what that God looks like for you. And I can determine, and it can be totally different. My sponsor does not have a traditional God, but she is still my sponsor and taught me this concept of the flow of life. I could totally feel it every time I think about the concept. For me, the flow of life is like a river, and I can feel like if I'm in, let's say, a kayak, and I'm in the river, and I'm floating down the river, things are just smooth, and I've got the kayak turned sideways, and there are rapids, and sometimes I'm hanging on to a branch, like not wanting to go with the flow. That concept of God really worked for me. And I'm fully an Episcopalian, so it connects really well with the Episcopal Church's idea of asking questions. It's one of my favorite things about the Episcopal Church. And then step 3 was making a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood God. That is the step for me that is, if I could do a visual, it's like I'm many times like this, holding my fists, and it's the idea of like letting go. That visible sign of letting go has been a reminder for me. Many times somebody across the room like do that to me, will say, "Oh yeah, let go of that," and then making that decision to let go, to let the God of my understanding connect through my life. There are a bunch of other steps, and we're not going to go through all the steps today. But I'll tell you, for me, like 10, 11, and 12, the last 3 steps are some of the most powerful steps. I'll share one more story, and then we'll go back to really learning something from the expert. But I remember step 10, continuing to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitting it. So I remember being early in recovery, and my mom had asked me to pick up some boxes. She was moving, and she said, "Can you stop by funny, but next to the meeting you go to is a liquor store, and there are boxes right behind the liquor store. Would you mind picking up some boxes there?" And I went to the meeting. I was having a great time at the meeting. I left the meeting. I went home, and I walked in the door, and my mom said, "Oh, did you get the boxes?" And I said, "Oh, there weren't any boxes there." And I walked away I took about 3 steps, and I thought, that wasn't true. Like, I just forgot. And I stopped, and I turned around, and I said, I don't know why I said that. I just forgot to get the boxes. It's just right around the corner. I'll go back and get boxes. It was my first personal experience with, like, something stopping me and saying, continue to take personal inventory. When you're wrong, promptly admit it. Just say, and I don't know why that sticks 17 years later in my brain of, like, oh yeah, I can stop and actually not make up something. I can just tell the truth, and it was okay. Like nothing happened for telling the truth. And then 11, like I said, 11 is the sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood God. And for me, that again is about breathing and finding a way to connect through prayer and meditation. And then 12, this is 12 right here. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, tried to carry the message to others and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So it's actually going to recovery meetings and sharing in recovery meetings and going to places like this and sharing about recovery. It's how I continue to grow. We can't keep what we have without giving it away. And so that's what this is.
And I think, just a couple things, and then I'll talk about this spending time in nature. So for me, kind of what step 10 looks like, or even what the steps look like, is, so a piece of it is I step in where I don't belong and I offer advice when it's really not needed. And I just had this experience yesterday. I was at the River Arts Festival and the guy was having trouble using his square and getting paid. And I was worried that he wasn't going to get the money he was supposed to get for the thing I was buying. Is it my responsibility to work out his technology? No. Did I jump in and offer advice? Yes. So again, did I then apologize when I recognized what I was doing? But it's just second nature for me. And so for me, that was sort of the dynamic of growing up with addiction, is that there's sort of this over-functioning and under-functioning. So typically what happens with, at least in my experience with the addiction, there's less functioning, and then I, for whatever reason, was the one that just jumped in and I can do it. I'm great at solving problems. If you need something done, let me know, I'll get it done for you. Recovery has taught me to just, that one of my favorite things from Al-Anon sayings is, and I may get it wrong as I'm saying this, don't do something, just sit there. And so that again is when the breathing comes in, because it's really hard to sit there when you can see the disaster of somebody's addiction imploding their life. So the other dynamic that occurs for me is, like, when you're feeling bad, I feel bad too. I have this overdeveloped sense of empathy. And so that, I know, is the driver that gets me going to get people to just, if you would just be right, I'd be right. And so learning that, you don't have to be okay for me to be okay.
And to continue what Laura's saying, like, one of the things that happens with me is that if I'm trying to help somebody or fix something, like, after I leave that person, I continue to have conversations in my head with that person about the outcomes of what's going to happen. And I remember very clearly somebody in an Al-Anon meeting saying to me that they were talking about themselves, and they said, I had to stop having arguments with people who weren't in the room with me. And it was an amazing thing to hear. Like, I thought, oh, I do that all the time. I'm like thinking how, like, this person's going to respond, how I'm going to respond to that, and carry out these conversations back and forth in my head. And it goes directly.
Yeah, exactly.
To what I was talking
Those
about.
imaginary conversations.
Yes.
And I win those arguments. usually.
Totally.
I sound so right and powerful. Okay. All right. So again, this is part of the gratitude walk for me, is spending time in nature, spending, in all of those things that it does some good things for us chemically. It does good things for our brains. It does good things for our bodies. I find God in nature. I find gratitude in nature. There's Nala. And pets are another thing that more people have bought pets during the pandemic.
We bought a pet.
Yeah, they actually, when you make eye contact with your pet, for any of you with pets, it doesn't have to be a dog, you both release oxytocin. That's sort of that feel-good chemical. It's super cool.
So we release a lot of oxytocin in my house. Our puppy is 6 months old and pretty adorable.
Yeah, that helps too. Play, I really developed a talent for cornhole during the pandemic. So much so that I think I have a rotator cuff injury as a result of cornhole. But at any rate, finding things to just to have fun. As kids we used to play, and so returning to that sense of joyfulness.
So I got advice from, if you haven't figured out yet, I can be pretty intense sometimes. And I got advice from a therapist one time, and he said to me, go find a swing set and swing. And I was like, I'm not going to go swing. Like, go to Overton Park, there's a big swing there, like adults can fit on it, go swing. And I was very about assignments that I'm told to do, especially if they're supposed to be good for me. And I sat down and I very tentatively started swinging. And then as I got I was like, oh yeah. And I remember swinging as high as I could swing that day. And I'm sure several people were like, what is that guy doing? But there was something to it, the idea of play, to release stress, to release that, and just to have fun. Sometimes sometimes recovery is, and the idea of finding a way to play, to break out of that, can be really, really helpful. It has been for me to be really helpful.
Can help you kind of get unstuck. And again, it does good things for your brain, that movement, that creating that pattern that you one of the things that's cool about being small is I can fit on swings. And I have been known to swing too. It's really fun.
Fantastic.
Okay. So again, finding ways to bring prayer and mindfulness and meditation into your daily life. I tend to have trouble sitting still very long, and so I do more of a moving meditation. And I know we're getting close to time because people are leaving. So
priests are leaving, so it's about time.
It's about time. Yes, they have a job to do. So at any rate, finding ways to sort of be quiet. Swimming has been a great meditation activity for me, because that movement, and I can't hear anybody. I put earplugs in, the bathing cap on, the world disappears, and just the feeling of the water and the movement.
And so for me, I know in the mornings when I get up and I reach for my phone, and to turn, the alarm is on my phone, and I reach for my phone, and if I put my phone down, I have a much better day. Mm-hmm. If I put my phone down and don't flip to something like news or Facebook or even my calendar for the day, if I just put it down and don't start my day that way, it is such a much better day. I don't do it all the time. Sometimes I just pick it up and just go. And allowing myself enough time in the mornings is not one of my best things. Most of the time I'm throwing the covers over, jumping out of bed, and running into the shower and getting to work. And I know that when I stop and do some just short practices, that it makes not only my recovery better, but my day, that specific day. I can tell at the end, I can tell halfway through the day if I haven't done it. I'm like, why are you anxious? Like, oh yeah, you should stop and breathe.
Yeah, stop, yeah, and connect. Media consumption,
What
that's
I'm
the other
talking
thing.
about.
Yeah, so limit the news that you expose yourselves to. I mean, there is some research showing that, that can cause PTSD, secondary trauma in terms of what we expose ourselves to. And sometimes it's hard to disengage, but finding ways, and then finding positive things to engage with. Podcasts, there's so much out there to consume, and find things that kind of build you up, make you feel lighter rather than bring you down.
I have just about every Ian Lamott audiobook that you could have, and I'll get in my car and I'll put them in, and I'll be, oh yeah, I'm connecting again to the Spirit.
Yeah, that's really important to be able to do that. So some of the stuff we've already talked about: moving your body, getting physical, eating healthy. What you put in your body makes a big, big difference. Again, some of the things that you can have some input and control over. Yesterday I had a lot of dessert, baby shower, and then I met a friend for dinner, had dessert. So I could really sort of feel the sugar this morning. I'm like, why am I feeling this way? I was like, I had a lot of sugar yesterday. So today I started with oatmeal, no sugar. Hopefully it'll be better. Sleep, go to bed and get up at the same time every day, ideally. Sleep without any distractions, no screens in your room, all of those things. Practice good sleep.
Yeah, and I got some great advice about sleep when I had insomnia one time. It was sleep when you can. Like even if you had a bad night and you have a chance, you can take a nap for an hour, and it makes a big difference. It has for me.
Yeah. All right. So again, addiction separates us from each other, separates us from God, and recovery is about creating that community again, coming back into God's grace, coming back into wholeness. And the church really is the perfect place for recovery to occur. Again, addiction is a spiritual malady, so the church is a way to soothe the spirit.
The first time I went to Calvary, I go to Calvary normally. The first time I went to Calvary, and it took actually 4 times to go to Calvary. I went 3 times, and I didn't do anything. I sat there, waited for people to talk to me, and nobody talked to me, because I'm sure that they thought, oh, he must have been here for a long time. And the 4th time, I filled out the little pew card and checked recovery. There was a box for recovery on there, and somebody called me and I checked the choir, and both the choir and somebody called me about recovery too, and they said, oh, you need to meet, and they gave me the name of the person in recovery at Calvary, and I connected with him, and he was actually helped start our recovery commission the 2nd time. But the church can be a fantastic place for it. Sometimes the church is quiet about it. Sometimes the church isn't as comfortable talking about it, but there are people within every church that priests know to talk to if you want to talk to somebody about recovery. The church can be a great place to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and to reach out, and the other piece to reach out and ask for help, and also if you notice somebody struggling, to just check in. How are you doing? Particularly in this time of disconnection, where that's a way to be together while we're apart. To check in on each other. All right, I think that was it. We did it.
That's the end of that presentation.
Okay.
We so appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Yeah, really appreciate you all joining, and feel free. I'll be here for a few minutes. If you have questions, we'd be happy to chat with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any last questions? Have we taken questions yet?
We haven't.
We haven't.
So here's an opportunity. I have a roaming mic. Just questions for our presenters and for those who are tuned in online. And if you have a question, just raise your hand and I can give this to you. It can be a simple or complicated question or something that you've been wondering about that they could share.
Tell us a little bit about the retreat next weekend.
Yeah, so I spoke about it a tiny bit at the beginning, but it's a retreat we're having, and this is the 4th time we've done this retreat in the diocese. It's at St. Columba, and it's the Reverend Dr. Stuart Hoke is our retreat leader. He is, the title of this year is Getting Back to the Basics of Recovery. It's steps 1, 2, and 3 that I mentioned earlier that he's going to help lead us through. It's a time for reconnecting with nature. St. Columba is a great place to go do that. It's going to be a great, hopefully we'll have great weather on Friday and Saturday. It's Friday and Saturday night. There is a day rate if you just want to come for the day. Less expensive. And if you're not ready to sleep in a place other than your house these days, you're welcome to that. The bishop is going to be there. She's giving a meditation on Saturday morning. It's fantastic meditation. I talked to her this week, and I won't give it away. When she told me what she wanted to do, I was like, that is the perfect meditation for recovery. So yeah, we're excited. Thanks, Ian, for asking. Sometimes hard to ask questions certainly in a bigger group, but in a smaller group too. So
It can be hard. Yeah.
we will be here if you want to ask questions afterwards in a more private manner. That's fantastic too.
Well, thank you again.
Thank
They
you so
just
much.
come up and make a few remarks too.
Okay.
Just to say thanks again to Laura and Shannon and for your gifts today. This is such important work, and here at Grace St. Luke's, many of you are aware that Lucy Owens, as our communications associate, one of her ministries includes all things related to the presence of 12-step offerings here at Grace St. Luke's, and that's on our website as well. And the clergy spend time often directing people to the different programs that we offer. So just to remind you, as others remind me, of how important it is to give support to those who may be curious about their journey around wellness, and particularly any potential addictions that are to be discussed pastorally, and to pass that information along. Next week, we will welcome David Waters. Many of you know David Waters. He will be here, and listen to this title: why I stopped watching the news. So David Waters is a famous journalist, but his topic will be why he stopped watching the news. So tune in next week online, or for those of you who are here in person. And I'll say bye for now from Grace St. Luke's. Thank you. Thanks again. Wow. You can just leave your mic in here. Press this down. Such a great team. Oh my God. Thank you for your gifts. And there Keith is catching his breath with a lovely homily at 8:30. So you get to kind of take a quick read through.